The galaxy was quiet that night. Stars burned far away, and the deep black between them was calm, without warning of what was coming. On the edge of known space, scanners began to flicker with strange signals. At first, the alien technicians thought it was an error, just static or dust interfering with the sensors, but the numbers kept repeating, strong and steady, like a heartbeat hidden in the void. Then the shapes appeared, huge, silent, and invisible until they decided to be seen. A fleet of ships emerged slowly, their outlines cutting across the darkness. They looked different from anything the Galactic Council had ever catalogued. No light reflected from them, no energy signature gave them away. They were not made of the metals and alloys the galaxy understood. They moved like shadows, drifting from a place where no stars should exist. Dark matter itself seemed wrapped around their hulls, cloaking them until they chose to reveal themselves. Inside the Council's observation towers, alarms began to scream. Alien officers shouted reports, their voices sharp and frightened. Unknown fleet approaching, unregistered design. Scans cannot penetrate the hulls. Each word spread panic. In all recorded history, every ship could be scanned, measured, and classified. But these ships defied science itself. Even the strongest sensors showed nothing but empty blackness, as though the ships were holes in space. The council chamber filled with nervous chatter. Delegates from dozens of species turned their eyes to the massive screens. Their tentacles, claws, wings, and hands trembled. The ships glided forward, silent but unstoppable. They did not broadcast identification codes, did not answer hails. They simply arrived, calm as a predator circling prey. One delegate whispered the thought that chilled them all: humans. That word spread like fire. The fragile species, once mocked as young and weak, had disappeared from galactic politics for many decades. Most assumed they were finished, burned out in wars, crippled by lack of resources, or simply too stubborn to survive. But now, at the edge of the galaxy, they had returned with something no one had ever imagined. The largest ship drifted closer. Its shape bent light in strange ways, as though reality itself bent around its hull. Stars behind it seemed to vanish, replaced by shadows. Engines left no trails. For the first time in centuries, the Galactic Council felt powerless. The old empires, who once thought themselves eternal, now looked like children facing a storm. Communications officers tried to send warnings. They demanded identification, asked for reasons, even threatened retaliation. Not a single reply came. The ships moved with complete silence, as if ignoring the Council's authority entirely. Each vessel was vast, larger than any dreadnought the galaxy had ever built. Their movements were precise, almost graceful, like predators that knew exactly where they were going. The silence was more frightening than weapons. If the humans had wanted war, they could have fired instantly. Instead, they simply revealed themselves, letting their presence weigh heavy on every mind in the chamber. It was a message without words. Humanity had returned, and they were no longer the weak species the Council remembered. Some delegates shouted in anger. They wanted the fleets mobilized, wanted to show force before fear spread further. But the admirals shook their heads. Their fleets could not even track these ships, let alone stop them. To attack would mean blind fire against shadows. Even if weapons were launched, who could be sure the humans hadn't found a way to bend dark matter around themselves, making them untouchable? One alien elder, old and scarred from ancient wars, leaned forward. His voice was low, almost broken with disbelief. "They hid in the dark," he said. "All these years, they studied the shadows where no one dared to look, and now they walk out carrying the night itself." His words sank into the chamber like poison. Out in space, the human fleet held position. They did not advance further, nor retreat. They simply hovered, an impossible presence against the stars. The silence stretched longer, making every heartbeat heavier inside the council chamber. Even the air seemed to grow cold, as though the dark matter around the ships reached across space and touched the council itself. For centuries, the Galactic Council had thought themselves unchallenged. Empires rose and fell within its laws, and no young race ever dared defy it. But this was different. The humans had not asked permission, had not sent requests, had not even warned of their return. They appeared as if the galaxy itself had betrayed its rulers and delivered them a new enemy. The council leader raised her voice, trying to calm the room. She ordered patience, ordered analysis, but no one listened. Fear made them restless. Every delegate watched the screens, waiting for a spark, a weapon, a word, anything that would explain the human's purpose. But nothing came, only silence, and the shadow of ships that should not exist. Rumors spread quickly. Some whispered that humans had learned to merge with dark matter itself, becoming part of the universe's hidden fabric. Others believed they had enslaved something ancient, forcing secrets out of the dark void. None of the theories made sense, but all of them made fear grow. Then the first ship shifted. Just a small movement, a slow turn, but enough to make every alien heart skip. It was not a random drift, it was deliberate, controlled. They were aligning, forming patterns like hunters surrounding prey. Yet, still they fired no weapons. The galaxy's rulers had always mocked Earth as stubborn, reckless, too emotional to survive in the stars. But looking at those black warships bending the void itself, the Council saw something new. Humanity had gone where no one else dared. They had touched the dark between the stars and returned wielding its secrets. In that moment, the chamber fell silent, truly silent. Even the alarms quieted. Every delegate, every officer, every guard understood the same truth. This was not a fleet begging for recognition. It was not a desperate attempt for peace. It was a warning, a silent roar across the galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and the universe would never sleep quietly again. Panic spread through the council chambers as the images of the Shadow Fleet hung on every screen. Delegates shouted over one another, voices mixing in dozens of languages. Some called for immediate mobilization, demanding fleets to intercept the intruders, while others begged for restraint, terrified of provoking something they could not understand. The hall, usually a place of ceremony and diplomacy, shook with fear and anger. High above the chamber, holographic projections of the ships hovered in ghostly silence. No matter how many scans the council ordered, no energy readings appeared. No weapons could be identified, no heat signatures traced. It was as if the ships were not even made of matter as the council knew it. Entire teams of scientists pounded on consoles, their limbs and appendages frantic, shouting that the data was useless. For the first time in their history, their technology had failed them. The older empires were the most shaken. Species who had ruled for millennia, who had crushed rebellions and burned entire worlds, now looked at one another with wide, uncertain eyes. If they admitted the truth, they were powerless. The younger races, long held down by strict council laws, whispered among themselves with something that looked like hope. If humans had built ships that no empire could fight, perhaps the age of council domination was ending. The council's supreme speaker slammed her staff to demand order. Her voice, projected by the chamber's systems, carried across the hall. She declared that the fleet might still be an illusion, a trick, perhaps even a desperate attempt by humans to gain recognition. She urged calm, but her words carried little weight. Even as she spoke, every eye returned to the holographic images, as if the black ships were pressing into their minds. The military commanders were summoned. Alien admirals in heavy armor entered the chamber, their movements stiff with tension. They were asked to explain what options existed if the ships attacked. Their answer was blunt and cold: none. Their fleets could not track the intruders. Weapons could not lock onto targets that sensors did not register. To engage would be to fire blindly into darkness while the humans struck back unseen. The chamber erupted in chaos again. One delegate, his scales shimmering with unease, accused humanity of breaking every law of the council. Another, her wings trembling, argued that laws meant nothing if the council had no way to enforce them. Each word deepened the fear. The chamber was no longer a council of leaders. It was a nest of creatures trapped by the shadow of predators. Whispers of old history began to return. Many remembered how humanity had once begged for inclusion in the council, only to be laughed at. They remembered how human ambassadors had been dismissed, how their fleets were denied entry to trade routes, how their technology was deemed primitive. Now those same outcasts had returned with something no species in the galaxy could comprehend. The chamber grew colder. It was not from the climate systems. It was something else, a creeping sensation that the humans could hear them, even from light years away. Delegates lowered their voices, but the tension remained. For the first time in centuries, the council felt the weight of power shifting. Some called for negotiation, insisting that a message be sent, an offer of peace extended. Others shouted that this was weakness, that to bow to before the humans would mean the end of the council's rule. The arguments spiraled with no conclusion, each side locked in fear of making the wrong move. A silence finally settled, heavy and suffocating. It came when one of the oldest members of the council, a being who had seen dozens of wars, rose from his seat. His voice cracked with age but carried across the chamber. "We thought them weak," he said. "We thought they were finished, but they did not die. They learned what we feared to touch. They hold the night itself." The words echoed through the hall. No one dared speak after him. The truth had been spoken, and it left the chamber trembling. The Galactic Council, the most powerful ruling body in history, no longer looked like a council at all. They looked like prey waiting for judgment. A sudden ripple spread through the council's great chamber when the central comms tower announced a transmission. The unknown fleet had finally spoken. Every delegate leaned forward, expecting threats or demands, but the voice that filled the air was calm, steady, and unmistakably human. It was not the roar of a conqueror, but the quiet tone of someone who knew they no longer needed to prove anything. The envoy appeared in holographic form, standing alone before the sea of alien leaders. His figure was small compared to the towering insectoids, the scaled lords, and the winged matriarchs who ruled the chamber. Yet something about him made the chamber fall silent. His eyes held no fear, his posture no weakness. For the first time, the council realized they were looking at a human who carried the weight of an entire species behind him. "You remember us," he began. "You remember Earth. The weak world, the desperate world, the one you ignored, mocked, and denied. You thought humanity would break. You thought we would vanish into history." His words cut through the silence, calm but sharp like a blade. "But we did not vanish. We learned, we endured, and now we have returned." The chamber shivered with unease. Some aliens tried to interrupt, but their voices died against the strength of his tone. The envoy continued without pause. "We did not come to conquer your council. We did not come to burn your worlds. We came because you left us no choice. For centuries we begged for aid, for respect, for recognition. You turned away. So we turned inward, into the shadows between stars. And there we found the answers you told us did not exist." Gasps echoed when he mentioned the shadows. Everyone in the chamber knew what he meant. Dark matter, the invisible foundation of the universe. Entire empires had spent lifetimes trying to harness it, but all had failed. Now a human spoke of it like it was nothing more than a tool they had shaped with their own hands. The envoy's expression hardened. "We do not ask for your permission. We do not ask for your pity. Humanity does not kneel anymore. We stand before you as equals, or as something greater, if you force our hand." His words were simple, but the silence that followed carried more weight than the most advanced weapons. Delegates shifted nervously. Some whispered that it was a bluff, a performance designed to scare them, but others saw the fleet outside their stations and knew it was no bluff. Those ships were real, and they were impossible. The envoy did not need to scream or threaten. His presence alone was enough. Finally, he spoke again, softer this time. "We built these warships not to rule you, but to survive you. You called us reckless. You left us isolated. You believed we would fade. Instead, we forged our survival in the dark, where none of you dared look. We are not here to destroy, but if humanity is ever cornered again, the galaxy will remember this moment as its first warning." The transmission ended as abruptly as it began. The envoy's image flickered out, leaving only silence in the chamber. No threats, no ultimatums, no demands, just a simple truth spoken with terrifying certainty. Humanity had returned, and they had nothing left to fear. The council sat frozen. Leaders who once laughed at Earth now found themselves afraid to breathe too loudly. The smallest of races who had always been silenced by stronger empires now glanced at one another with cautious hope. The galaxy had just been reminded that humans were not fragile, not broken, not defeated. They were something else entirely, and the darkness between the stars was their proof. The Council's science divisions worked without pause, desperate to understand what they had witnessed. Laboratories filled with frantic energy as fragments of leaked data from the human fleet were passed between specialists. Every empire sent their brightest minds to analyze the readings, but the results were the same. The ships carried no detectable mass, No standard energy trails and no known propulsion systems. It was as if they were built from nothing, woven out of the void itself. A group of researchers gathered around a holographic projection of the largest human vessel. They debated endlessly, pointing at its strange contours, its shifting shadows, the way its presence bent light into unnatural patterns. One scientist one scientist whispered that the ship itself might be a dark matter construct, stabilized by forces no one had ever controlled. The others scoffed, but none could prove her wrong. Their instruments kept returning blank results. Where there should have been numbers and readings, there was emptiness. Some recalled that humanity had always been obsessed with mysteries others ignored. While the Council's civilizations had grown comfortable, feeding on trade and tradition, humans had sent fragile ships into dangerous zones. They studied black holes, drifted near pulsars, and charted dead systems where no profit could be made. Now it seemed their reckless curiosity had delivered them something the rest of the galaxy had dismissed as fantasy. Rumors spread quickly across research stations. It was said the humans had built reactors that did not burn fuel, but pulled energy directly from the invisible framework of the universe. Others claimed they had found a way to anchor their ships in dark matter currents, moving them faster than light without tearing space apart. Each theory was wilder than the last, yet none of them could be disproved. The truth was hidden behind those black hulls, and the Council hated that they could not see inside. The most chilling discovery came from a fragment of intercepted code, encrypted signals between the ships. The scientists cracked only a small portion, but it was enough to terrify them. The human vessels were not just machines. They were alive in some way, linked through a network of dark energy, sharing awareness like a hive. Every ship was a mind of its own, yet all of them were one. It meant that humanity did not merely command a fleet, they had become the fleet. In the council chamber, the speaker demanded answers. Scientists bowed their heads, unable to deliver anything but theories and fear. She struck the floor with her staff in rage to know how humans had achieved this. The reply was simple and painful. We do not know. For the first time in the council's existence, knowledge had failed them. Delegates began to whisper that perhaps this was the reason humans had been silent for so long. While the rest of the galaxy mocked their weakness, humanity had been learning secrets hidden in the very bones of reality. They had not wasted centuries in comfort. They had turned their isolation into a weapon. The shock ran deeper than fear of war. If humanity had mastered dark matter, then every scientific law the Council trusted might be broken. Entire empires built on control of resources and technology could collapse overnight. Their fleets, their weapons, their star systems, all of it could be made useless by a species once treated as irrelevant. In the privacy of their quarters, some leaders shook with rage, others with awe. They could not admit it aloud, but they all understood one truth. The humans had stepped into a realm of knowledge where no other species dared to go. And now, by unveiling their ships, they had announced it to the galaxy. The balance of power was gone, and the age of certainty was over. The Council demanded proof, and humanity gave it without hesitation. At the edge of a neutral system, one of the dark matter warships moved into position. Thousands of eyes across the galaxy watched the broadcast, expecting destruction, expecting fire and death. Instead, the ship drifted calmly toward a fortified planet, its defense grid alive with cannons and shields. The planet belonged to no one side, chosen because it symbolized neutrality. If the humans struck here, the entire galaxy would know. The planetary defenses locked on. Turrets rotated, missiles primed, shields brightened into glowing walls of energy. It was a system designed to repel even the most powerful fleets in the Council. The commanders of that world announced they were ready, their voices sharp with pride, certain their systems could hold. The human ship did not answer. It glided closer, its surface rippling like a shadow against the stars. Alarms screamed as weapons opened fire. Blinding beams of plasma shot forward, slamming into the human ship, and vanished. The energy bent, twisted, and disappeared as though it had been swallowed by nothingness. Missiles flew, but midway through their trajectory they turned into harmless debris, their guidance systems erased by unseen forces. The planet's proud defenses had become fireworks against the night. Then the true demonstration began. The human vessel extended a ripple of dark light, a wave that spread out silently, touching every satellite, every defense cannon, every orbiting station. In an instant, everything went dark. Screens turned to static, weapons shut down, shields collapsed as though they had never existed. The entire defensive grid was disabled without a single shot being fired. The planet itself remained untouched, its cities glowing peacefully below. The message was clear: humanity could have destroyed it, but chose not to. Across the galaxy, silence followed. Scientists replayed the footage, trying to find how the humans had done it. No explanation emerged. Theories spoke of manipulation of quantum states, control over subatomic particles, or even rewriting the laws of causality, but none satisfied the fear in their hearts. What they saw was not technology as they understood it. It was domination of the unseen fabric of reality. Inside the council chamber, the demonstration was met with horror. Some shouted it was an act of war, a deliberate humiliation. Others whispered it was restraint, a warning rather than an attack. But all of them knew the same truth. If the humans had wanted, that planet would already be ash. The envoys of weaker species trembled with a strange mixture of terror and relief. They had always been trampled by the greater empires of the Council, their voices ignored, their worlds taxed and stripped. Now they watched humanity erase the pride of those same empires with a flicker of dark energy. It felt like justice delivered by shadows. The Council leaders demanded the human envoy explain himself. Why spare the planet? Why show mercy? His reply was brief. To show you we could. That was all he said, and then he left the chamber, leaving the Council staring into silence once again. No warheads, no casualties, no destruction. Just proof that humanity could unmake defenses without firing a single shot. The galaxy had seen power before, but never like this. This was not conquest. It was control. It was a new kind of war, one no empire had prepared for, and it had just begun. The council chamber became a battlefield of words. The great empires who had ruled for centuries shouted louder than anyone else. Their pride was wounded, their authority shaken. They demanded a united strike against humanity, declaring that no race should be allowed to hold such power unchecked. But even as they raised their voices, their allies looked away, unwilling to commit fleets against an enemy they could not even scan. Whispers began in the shadows of the chamber. Smaller civilizations, long forced into silence, traded glances filled with quiet excitement. For generations they had lived under the boots of the powerful, their resources stolen, their worlds taxed. Now they saw a chance, perhaps the first in history, to stand on equal ground. Some even dared to imagine alliances with humanity, a future where the council's chains were broken. The empires sensed this shift and grew desperate. Threats flew across the chamber. Accusations of betrayal, promises of punishment, warnings of annihilation, yet their words rang hollow. Every delegate remembered the demonstration, shields collapsing, weapons turning useless, an entire planet's defenses erased like chalk in the rain. Their fleets, no matter how vast, would crumble the same way. In the private halls behind the chamber, secret deals began. Spies moved silently between delegations. Some species sent envoys to humanity in secret, offering resources, intelligence, even loyalty in exchange for protection. Others plotted rebellion, calculating how much longer they had to endure before humanity's shadow warships redrew the galaxy's borders. The fear was not just of human weapons. It was the realization that the foundation of power had shifted. The Council's strength was built on control of trade routes, energy supplies, and military fleets. But humanity had revealed something greater, the ability to deny all of it with a single wave of dark energy. Empires that had stood for 10,000 years could be toppled without a battle. One of the most powerful warlords stood and roared across the chamber, his armor gleaming, his voice shaking the walls. He swore his fleets would march against Earth, that humanity would be burned before their arrogance spread. His words earned cheers from some, but others noticed the tremor in his tone, the fear he tried to bury under his fury. Even he knew that his armies would not survive. The chamber was no longer a council, it was a fracture. Old friendships strained, rivalries sharpened, trust dissolved. The galaxy, once united under the council's authority, was splintering. And in every corner of the chamber, one truth grew heavier with each passing hour. The humans had not fired a shot, yet they had already redrawn the galaxy's map. Delegates returned to their worlds carrying fear in their hearts. Some prepared for war, others for alliance. All of them knew one thing for certain. Humanity had stepped into the center of galactic politics, and nothing could push them back into the shadows again. The human envoy returned to the chamber with the same calm steps as before. No guards, no escorts, just one figure walking into the heart of the galaxy's most powerful assembly. This time, no one dared to interrupt. The images of the disabled defense grid still haunted them, and the silence that followed him was heavier than any threat. He stopped at the center, his eyes sweeping across the tiers of alien leaders, and then he spoke with a voice that carried to every corner of the hall. "Humanity does not seek your thrones," he said. "We do not seek to rule your empires or to burn your skies. We have come only for recognition, for respect long denied. For centuries, you forced us to the edges, treated us as children, mocked our weakness. That time is over. We are not here as petitioners. We are here as equals." A murmur spread through the chamber, but none dared to interrupt. The envoy's presence pressed on them like gravity. He continued, his words sharper now. "But know this, if humanity is threatened, if your fleets gather against us, if your empires believe they can cage us again, then you will learn what it means to fight a species that has built its survival in the dark. The galaxy will tremble before what we have become." The words struck like thunder. Delegates leaned back, their faces pale or hardened, their claws, wings, and tentacles twitching in unease. The younger races listened with wide eyes, hearing something they had never heard in that chamber before, defiance that could not be punished. One of the elder lords stood, his voice trembling with rage. He accused humanity of issuing threats, of demanding power through fear. The envoy turned his gaze to him, calm and steady. "We are not demanding power, we are offering peace. But peace cannot exist without respect, and if respect is refused, then fear will take its place." The hall fell into silence again. The ultimatum was simple, and it left no room for debate. Humanity had drawn a line across the galaxy, and every species would have to choose how to stand before it. The speaker called for a vote, her voice heavy with dread. One by one, delegates raised their hands, claws, and appendages. Some did it out of fear, others out of grudging admiration, and a few with quiet hope. When the count was finished, the result was clear. By majority, humanity was accepted into the council, not as a junior race, not as a vassal, but as a power equal to the oldest empires. The envoy gave no speech of triumph. He simply bowed once and turned to leave, the shadows of his fleet still hanging outside like a second galaxy. His silence carried more weight than victory chants. The message had been delivered. Humanity had claimed its place, and no one could deny it. The council chamber stood quiet long after the vote was cast, as if the galaxy itself was holding its breath. Outside, the human fleet remained in formation, their black hulls drifting like pieces of night torn from the void. No weapons fired, no armies landed, yet every empire felt the same shiver. This was no longer their galaxy alone. Humanity had carved itself a throne out of shadows and silence. News spread faster than light. Across distant worlds, civilians whispered the same name with awe and fear: human. Some celebrated, claiming a new age of balance had begun, that at last the empires who had ruled with cruelty would be forced to share power. Others locked their doors and prepared for war, terrified that the humans would not stop with respect, but demand submission. In the marketplaces of fringe colonies, traders sold images of the dark ships as charms of protection, while generals of great fleets stared at the footage and felt their pride collapse. On Earth, the reaction was different. Crowds filled cities, watching the broadcasts with tears and cheers. For centuries, humanity had been kept outside the great halls of galactic power. Now they had stepped into the center and made the galaxy listen. No longer forgotten, no longer mocked, their place was carved into history. Children pointed at the sky with pride, and veterans who had fought in forgotten wars finally saw their sacrifices honored. The Council's oldest species gathered in secret. They spoke of strategies, alliances, plots to weaken humanity before its influence grew too strong. But even as they whispered, doubt poisoned their words. Every scenario ended the same way: fleets erased, weapons silenced, planets exposed. How do you fight a shadow that bends reality itself? The smaller races, those long crushed under tribute and law, saw opportunity in the new order. Envoys traveled quietly to human diplomats, offering friendship, trade, and allegiance. For the first time in memory, the balance of power was shifting toward those who had been ignored. Where the Council had ruled with fear, humanity now inspired both fear and hope. In the center of the galaxy, statues of the Council's founders stood tall, their stone gazes fixed on eternity. But beneath them, whispers echoed. The age of the old empires was fading. A new chapter had begun, written not in blood but in shadows and silence. Humanity's warships did not need to fire a single shot to reshape the galaxy. They had only needed to arrive. From that day forward, every decision in the Council carried the same weight. Every vote, every law, every whisper of rebellion was measured against one unspoken truth. Humanity had returned, armed with the secrets of the dark. And as the galaxy turned beneath the endless stars, a new fear lingered in every heart. If this was only their beginning, what would humanity become next?